Last season was a surprise in many ways for the Minnesota Vikings, ready for their rookie QB to come out, and then instead, after his injury, found that Sam Darnold had some magic left to go, and the Vikings had a solid season, not only in the NFL, but also for fantasy. Ed and I are here to break down the fantasy relevance of the Vikings roster this year, there. And with Mr. Darnold out of the building, it is time for J.J. McCarthy to take the stage. How are you feeling about a player we've spoken about a lot, but seen nothing from yet?
That's it. Minnesota have gone all in on J.J. McCarthy, and we will finally, fingers crossed, get to see what he has in his locker. I suppose the big question has to be, is he ready for the NFL? Just to remind you, he's got a strong arm, good mobility, some criticism of his mechanics in the pre-draft process. Seems like a long time ago now. He will have the weapons, of course, and he's got the coach who made Sam Darnold into a fantasy superstar. So, if he can weave that sort of magic, who knows what he can do with McCarthy. They're another team who sought to rebuild their O-line in the off-season, so he should have some protection. He's going off the board as QB 19, ahead of the likes of Nailor, Tua, Stafford, Geno, all kind of established quarterbacks. So, I'm not really giving my opinion in terms of where I am, but where are you on him? Is that fair where he's going off the board, or should we be a bit more hesitant?
I don't know. The fact that the biggest vote of confidence is the fact that the Vikings chose not to keep Sam Darnold, who had proven to be successful. That could be that they saw limitations in what they could do with Darnold and what Darnold could do as they look to further evolve the scheme. It could be because they feel they've got the real deal with J.J. McCarthy. Something that is massively on my radar with the Vikings, with both McCarthy and Hockenson, is adults who go by JJ, TJ. That's on my radar. Something that's almost annoys me as much as zeros on shirts. Wow. The thing that I've got on here is, obviously, we've got no stats about McCarthy, but the fact that Vikings QBs combined over the last 3 seasons have scored the 7th most fantasy points. And there have been some absolute humdingers of names there. So we've got, obviously, Captain Kirk. We've also got Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Sam Darnold. They've turned out good fantasy value with below average real life and fantasy quarterbacks. We all saw what happened when Kirk Cousins left and was a fantasy irrelevance last season, really. So there is a route for that. For me, I've got potential streamer QB. This is me sitting firmly on the fence. I'm not happy in redraft. Dynasty's a whole different situation. In redraft, I'm not happy to pick up a quarterback that I have no idea what I'm getting from. So the only time I would get him is if I had a deeper bench and I wanted to put a backup QB on there and just leave him to sit to see what I had.
I think the thing that people see, we'll talk about them as we go, is the weapons that he has, isn't it? And as you pointed out, the Vikings must have huge confidence in him because there's very little behind him. They're going with him from day one, I suppose, as they were probably going to last year before the injury. So I agree. I'm a bit hesitant. I'm a bit of a nervous fantasy player, and I haven't seen anything from McCarthy yet. So I'd find it difficult to draft him as my QB1 or even a QB in a Superflex league.
Next up, a player that we just seem to talk about the fact he's absolutely going to stop being fantasy relevant every single season, and he just seems to keep producing. And my absolute favorite picture of any player in all of our 32 deep dive shows, we have Aaron Jones Sr. Thoughts, Edward?
Yeah, I mean, he bounced back really impressively last year in his first season in Minnesota, ended up as RB15, which far exceeded his ADP. The second half of 2024, though, was a concern as his early pace dropped right off. He's also hit 30, so the usual RB over-the-hill questions are going to be asked, understandably. I mean, despite that drop-off last year, he really let you down, and I'm not sure if there's going to be anyone really making the case to replace him behind him, although we'll talk about someone who I think might steal some of his work in a moment. But I think he's a clear RB1. He's never been an absolute beast of a workhorse, and he never will be, but he'll always top up his points all in the receiving game. And I just wonder if there's a bit of value in his current ADP of RB26, or is that absolutely spot on?
I do agree. I think there's a little bit of value there because we're talking about someone that you're taking as RB18 last year, and he gave you 10 top 24 finishes. That is a completely fair return. And if it wasn't quite such a kind of a blocks of form in the season, that was more kind of evenly distributed, I don't think we'd necessarily be questioning that. I mean, at 30, he feels like he's a lot older than 30 for some reason, does Aaron Jones? He just seems to have been around forever. I just think, going where he's going, RB26, if you're getting him as your third running back, which is highly probable there, I think you could do a hell of a lot worse. He's a player I've taken in best ball loads when he's dropped into that sort of region. And if you want to stock up on wide receivers earlier in your draft, I think you could do worse than him as your RB2 as well, to be honest. So, I think I'm positive as you are, and I just don't see it dropping off this year. Although you're right, there is a little bit of competition creeping up on him.
Yes. I mean, there's a couple. I think Ty Chandler, who we're going to talk about first, looks set for a breakout season. It made a fast start last year, but then did nothing after week 2. I just wonder, is he cut out for the NFL? And I think he's probably dropping down behind Jordan Mason, who the Vikings made the offseason move for. And I think he'll get the goal line work. So he'll definitely be worth a bench stash, and we'll have some big weeks for DFS and best ball, but will be inconsistent. So maybe when it comes to redraft, nothing more than a bench stash. But out of the two, I think Mason might be a more reliable option than Ty Chandler.
Yeah, the fact that they've gone out and got him is because they see a role for him. So I don't think he's just going to be the backup. I think they do see a role for him, and 7 to 10 carries a game, especially if it's on that guy, he could give you some value there, and where he's going, once again, could give you a return on that. So I agree. Mason could be interesting. I think there's a bigger chance that he's going to be annoying, because I think we're not going to be quite sure when to start Mason, but you will always start Jones, and I think that's where he will become quite frustrating. He might fit into that fancy gremlin category. I think
territory.
he might be in that. Yeah. We need to have a fancy gremlin show, I think.
We do. We need to
introduce it's usually RB2s that fit that bracket. Oh, on Taysom Hill, obviously. Before we move on to talk about a player who's most definitely not a gremlin, he is more godlike than gremlin. I think that is for sure. Please do take a moment to subscribe, give this video a like, and give us a share as well. And then whilst you're here, once you've finished our deep dive of the Minnesota Vikings, go and check out one of our 31 other deep dive shows on all of the NFL teams that we profile through the off season, and then head into the season as well with our in-season content. But Ed, a bona fide fancy superstar, one of the best highlight reel players in the league, Mr. Justin Jefferson. Think he might be useful for our fantasy rosters this year?
Never know. I mean, with the loss of Cousins, fantasy managers were slightly more hesitant when drafting JJ last year, but of course they shouldn't have been, as he still managed to find his way to wide receiver 2 behind the greatest wide receiver to ever walk the earth, Jamar Chase.
I've heard of him.
Sorry, I had to get that in. Jefferson averaged 18.7 points last year in PPR leagues, lowest mark since his rookie season, but clearly still enough to maintain his status as a fancy behemoth. And you jokes aside, arguably the greatest receiver in the game. The big unknown is, of course, J.J. McCarthy. But as with Darnold, Kevin O'Connell will not be afraid to let McCarthy throw the ball around. And if it's anywhere in his vicinity, J.J. is hauling it in. He's about as safe a fancy bet as you're going to get. Could explode. and make not selecting him as the 101 look a bit silly, really. So, yeah, guaranteed he's going in the first 5 picks, and barring injury, he's guaranteed to get you big points.
He only had a couple of games that let you down, which every player has at some point. I think it's just because we didn't have a mega week for the season. I think as Darnold was settling in, I think the fact that he drew a lot of coverage and that helped Jordan Addison. Just looking down, it wasn't until week 7 that he was wide receiver 12 in week 4, and then wide receiver 5 in week 7. So it wasn't until week 7 I think you thought, oh, now we're getting going. But he was just so consistent with putting up decent numbers every single week. And when you're taking a wide receiver that high, you're taking them for the Jamar Chase like we saw last year. We have 40 points here, 40 points there. But as brilliant as they are and as happy as you are when they happen, as much as you dominate that week, for your week in, week out value, Justin Jefferson is such a safe pick to be taken at that part of the draft. And yeah, he's wide receiver 2. It's going to be a case of, is it Lamb? Is it Chase? Is it Jefferson? You can make a case for any of those 3, taking the first in any order. I think for me, Jefferson and Chase are a coin toss, and then Lamb is slightly below. But so I'd quite happily accept an argument that put Lamb on top as well. If you get one of the 3, you're very, very happy.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jefferson, he's just as close to guaranteed points as you get, and he's just someone you can slot into your lineup every single week, no matter who the opposition is, and know you're getting big points.
Who are we looking at next, just behind him?
Yeah, so Jordan Addison had a very solid couple of NFL seasons, finishing just outside the top 20 fantasy receivers in both campaigns. Loves a big play, and that can translate into some monster numbers. Weeks 12 and 14 last year stand out. Just an interesting note, in week 14 last year, he scored 39.3 fantasy points, yet he was only wide receiver 3. So that must have been a chase week, but I can't, whoever else was ahead of him. It's not often you score that many in your wide receiver 3. I mean, to counter these big weeks, he will have some down weeks. 5 of his 17 weeks were single-digit fantasy scores. Addison's ADP does seem to undervalue him. He's going off the board at about wide receiver 33. I suppose you need to take into account that McCarthy factor. And also, I think there's a possible DUI suspension heading his way, likely to be 3 games. So that might be putting people off. And with the likes of Jefferson and Hockenson, who we'll talk about in a moment as competition, his targets are always going to be limited. But I do feel that wide receiver 33 is slightly undervaluing him.
I think you're right. The ban is going to come into that. So we are recording on the 25th of July. So we've not got any news on that. 3 weeks seems to be what we're hearing most frequently. So we are not experts in this field whatsoever. It could be more, could be less. Are you happy taking a player with a top 24 wide receiver pick if you're without them for 3 weeks and then they've got to come in as well? Because you're not hit the ground running week 4. That's the point that everyone else is up to speed. So you've probably got a bit of catch up to then. So realistically, you're not going to see that return until week 6. You've got to factor it in. But we've seen it before. Everyone went very low on Alvin Kamara when he was missing those, 4 or 5 games. And then he turned out to be an absolute steal by the end of the season. It's just one of the things to factor in. I think Jordan Addison's sort of player that I like pairing when I've got a steady wide receiver 1 already in place. Ironically, you could make a case. Not many times I make the case for the same players on the same teams. You could make a case that a Jefferson Addison pairing is quite nice. But yeah, where you get him at the minute, I think he will return that. And ADP, I think we've probably already factored in the ban there. That's about the point I think you could consider taking him and take it on the chin if you're without him for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to Minnesota, I would say that he and Jefferson are clear of the other options there are at receiver. There are a few other options I'll briefly talk about. You've got Ty Felton, 3rd-round rookie pick, who's going to look to compete to be the wide receiver 3. Exploded with some big numbers in his final season in Maryland. Really shot at the combine. possibly one to keep an eye on. Jalen Nailor finally had some impact last season after injuries and a lack of confidence really hindered him. He got 6 touchdowns as the wide receiver 3 last year, and he'll be competing for that role again. But I think he will face strong competition from Felton. Rondale Moore missed all of last season with a knee injury, so it just remains to be seen how he bounces back from that. He's going to have a role in the offense, but I'm not sure how much fancy relevance he'll have.
No, I agree. Each of those is a player that we could be talking about from a wave point of view. Rondale Moore does concern me because even before the injury last year, we weren't quite sure whether we were interested in him. Coming off the back of the injury, there's a lot to be answered. So yeah, with one absolute elite receiver ahead, one excellent receiver, and then a solid tight end we're about to talk about next as well. I'd be surprised if any of those 3 you can play at any point with confidence this season.
Yeah, they're relying on injuries to be relevant. They'll have, I think, Nailor and Felton will have some big weeks in as we've discussed, likely to be high scoring offense. But yeah, from a fantasy perspective, I don't think they're going to do much.
Let's finish things up then, turning to tight end.
Yeah, TJ Hockenson. I mean, last year was always going to be a season of rebuilding as he returned from that horrible torn ACL. He never looked right, finishing the season with 455 yards and 0 touchdowns. However, full preseason, you'd hope that he returns to his pre-injury explosiveness, and he really was an explosive tight end. Of course, he faces competition for targets. And again, we have to consider the J.J McCarthy factor, but he's got to be a top 10 tight end again, you would think. Going off the board as tight end 5, so clearly fantasy managers have faith in a Hockenson bounce back. Is that overvaluing him slightly? He's a tier 1 tight end at his very best, but I think with the fitness question and the QB play not being certain, will he be able to fulfill that potential this year? I'm not 100% sure. I think tight end 5 is possibly a ceiling, and that's where you've gone as well.
Yeah, for me, he's in tier 3 for tight end. So I've got Bowers McBride as 1, Kittle in a tier 2 of his own, and then Kelsey, Hockenson, Laporta, all of whom we know what they can do, all of whom have their various different question marks. And out of those, I would say Laporta feels the least risky of the 3, but there's a way that each of those breaks the top 3 if any of the 3 above don't perform. So yeah, you could do a lot worse than Hockenson. It's where you take him. So that tier of tight end going off between round 5 and round 6. I'll be honest, if I don't get one of my top 3, I'm hanging on for tight end until I get down to a bit more value. I'm happy to wait right till the end of the draft and look at a Goddard, a Ferguson, Loveland, Warren, Andrews sort of player instead, because I'd rather take there. But that's no slight on Hockenson. That's just how I like to put my teams. If I don't get a top tight end, I'd rather kick it down the road a bit. So I can't imagine I'll get many shares in Hockenson. But where he's going, I think is absolute fair value, and I think you could repay that quite comfortably for you.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. There's not going to be enough separation between him and the next kind of tier behind him to spend such a high pick on him. I mean, he'll have a bit of competition. Josh Oliver stepped up impressively in Hockenson's absence. But again, a question I asked on other teams, can the offense sustain 2 fancy relevant tight ends? Probably not. Oliver might be a canny DFS pickup in tight end friendly matchups, but when it comes to redraft, unless Hockenson has real problems with his fitness again, I think it's not going to be relevant for Oliver.
Well, what do you see as the 2025 outlook for the Minnesota Vikings then, Ed?
Genuinely, like the way you responded to the J.J McCarthy question, I just don't know. I think they could have a great season. Their defense, was much improved last year, so that will be a factor. Again, they're in a tough division. But they should be aiming for the playoffs. They've got the talent. But yeah, it all depends on J.J. McCarthy. If he has a solid season, then I think they've got a chance of the playoffs. Whether they go deep in the playoffs, I don't know. But yeah, remains to be seen, and I'm not massively sure.
That is why you come for us for that absolute clinical decision making. But I completely agree. I'm not sure either. The Vikings feel like they will always be dangerous, even if they underwhelm at some point. And yeah, McCarthy is that question mark. They fit in the bracket of teams I'm excited to see what they look like as we get into the season, though. That is for sure. Well, that is all from us for one more show. Please, as we always say, go and check out one of the other 31 deep dives now that you've finished with this one. I'm going to pick your favorite team or a team you're not 100% sure on what you would value their roster for fantasy. But as always, that is all from me. It is all from Ed, and it is time once again for Malcolm to take us.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.